still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
I have kissed honey lips, felt the healing fingertips. It burned like fire, this burning desire. I have spoke with the tongue of angels. I have held the hand of the devil. It was warm in the night. I was cold as a stone.
But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
I believe in the kingdom come, then all the colors will bleed into one, bleed into one. But yes, I'm still running. You broke the bonds, you loosed the chains, you carried the cross of my shame, of my shame. No, I believe it,
But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Good morning. Let's stand and sing our first song, which is found on page 87 of the songbook, All Fly Away.
Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. When the shadows of
next song is that handout that Dave mentioned. It's a white piece of paper folded up inside your handout, inside your... It doesn't seem to have a title, but it's Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah.
Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Open, Lord, the crystal fountain, whence the living waters flow. Let the fiery cloudy pillar guide me all my journey through. Strong deliver, be thou still my strength and shield. Strong deliver, be thou still my strength and shield. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. Bear me through the swelling current, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee.
How are you today? Good. Well, it's nice to see you. I'm going to read you a story about someone. Well, let me start by thinking about this. Do you know where this came from? You think it came from China? Is that because of the writing? Or the pottery? Okay. And did someone make it, or did it just show up? Someone made it, right?
What about this one? In the east? Well, this one was actually made by my daughter. So this is from Colorado. So see that? All right. So what would happen? Can you imagine one of these pots saying to the person who made it, "You didn't make me. I made myself." Think that's possible? That'd be kind of silly, wouldn't it? It'd be hard to imagine that. It would be silly. But, so this reading is about that, where the Lord says, sometimes we think that, well, the Lord didn't make me. I just made myself, and I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter. And the Lord is trying to tell us that He made us. He made each one of us, and He made us so we can be happy. And He teaches us how we can be happy in His Word. So let's start with this story. This is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 29. It says, "What sorrow awaits those who try to hide their plans from the Lord, who do their evil deeds in the dark. The Lord can't see us," they say. "He doesn't know what's going on." How foolish can you be? He is the potter, and He is certainly greater than you, the clay. Should the created things say of the one who made it, "He didn't make me"? Does a jar ever say, "The potter who made me is stupid"? Soon, and it will not be very long, the forest of Lebanon will become a fertile field, and the fertile field will yield bountiful crops. In that day, the deaf will hear words read from a book, and the blind will see through the gloom and the darkness, and the humble will be filled with fresh joy from the Lord. The poor will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. Amen. So the Lord's trying to make that point that, can you imagine a pot like this or a jar saying, "You didn't make me, I just made myself. Look, I just created myself, and here I am. I'm a wonderful pot." Does that sound silly to say that? What would you like to say? Good job, making yourself. There you go. Well, it didn't make itself, did it? As you said, someone made it. This one was made in South Africa, actually. And this one, as we said, was made in Colorado. So what do you think the point of a pot like this is? Why do you think it was made? Yeah, we can put stuff in it, right? So what kind of stuff would you like to put in a beautiful bowl like that, do you think? Water. Maybe some soup. Yeah. Tea, maybe. Anything else you'd like to put in there? Blueberries? Okay. So you wouldn't want to put in like a bunch of old rotten leaves or anything like that, would you? Doesn't seem like the right use for that beautiful pot. Huh. What about maybe some delicious candies? What do you think about that? That's a good use of that pot. So that looks like what this pot was made for. Oh, suddenly we have some more people interested. So the Lord is telling us this story because He wants us to know something about ourselves, right? It's easy for us to look at a pot like this or a bowl like this and say, "Oh, that's made for a very important reason, and someone obviously made it, and we can use it for something useful like this." He's saying, well, you guys, the Lord made each one of us for a very special purpose too. And it's silly, just like it is for the pot to say, "The pot didn't make me," for me to say, I wasn't made by the Lord. I just showed up and I made myself, and I can do whatever I want, and I can disregard or not listen to what the Lord tells me in His Word. But He's telling us these things because they help us to be happy. So when the Lord tells you to be kind to each other, you think He's trying to tell you that so that you'll be happy? I think He will. And the Lord tells us to help each other and be useful. You know that when we're useful, when we do things, like if you're at home and maybe someone's baking some bread or some cookies or something and you help, is that fun for you? That feels good, doesn't it? It helps. It's fun to help out. Or maybe doing chores. Maybe you think about that not as much. Well, I don't know if I want to sweep or clean up. But I bet if you do it, you'll feel happier. Because when we do something useful, the Lord fills us with happiness. So it's kind of like this bowl. It's filled with these happy little gummy bears from Whole Foods that are all natural. So I'll invite you to take, I'll say 2, but I also want you to check with your parents before you eat them and just say, "Is it okay if I eat these?" And maybe they'll say you can have them later or whatever. But are you willing to do that for me? She said it was okay. You got the okay from Mom. All right, so why don't we practice kindness and patience by getting them gently and quietly, making sure everybody else gets some too. And then you can go back to your seat, okay? All right, thank you. Good job. See, that's not so hard, is it? Yeah. Very good. You got them? Very nice. Thank you. Good job, everybody.
Let's stand for our next song, which is You Are the Potter, found on page 202.
You are the potter, I am the clay. Help me, Lord Jesus, to let you have your way. Hold me, mold me, never let me go. You are the potter, and I will praise you. Yes, I'll surrender my life to you. Yes, I will praise you. You are the Lord. You're the refiner, I am the gold. Take me and make me precious to hold. Keep me close to your heart. You're the refiner, and I will praise you. Yes, I'll surrender my life to you. Yes, I will praise you. You are the Lord. You are the thresher, I am the corn. Reaping the joy where you sowed with mourning. Take me, bring me, Lord Yahweh, you are the thresher. And I will praise you. Yes, I'll surrender my life to you. Yes, I will praise you. You are the Lord. And I will praise you. Yes, I'll surrender my life to you. Yes, I will praise you. You are the Lord.
Bow your heads for a blessing on the children.
That song is Lead Me, Lord, found on page 99.
Lead me, Lord. Lead me in thy righteousness. Make
seated. Next reading is by Kaylin Kelly.
Deuteronomy 2:1. Then we turned around and headed back across the wilderness toward the Red Sea, just as the Lord had instructed me, and we wandered around in the region of Mount Seir for a long time. Then at last the Lord said to me, "You have been wandering around in this hill country long enough. Turn to the north. Give these orders to the people. You will pass through the country belonging to your relatives, the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. The Edomites will feel threatened, so be careful. Do not bother them, for I have given them all the hill country around Mount Seir as their property, and I will not give you even 1 square foot of their land. If you need food to eat or water to drink, pay them for it. For the Lord your God has blessed you in everything you have done. He has watched your every step through this great wilderness. During these 40 years the Lord your God has been with you, and you have lacked nothing."
Thank you, Kaylin. A few selected readings from the Heavenly Doctrines on the idea of, or the Lord's divine providence. God's providence is different from any other kind of leading or guidance in that it constantly has in view what is eternal and is constantly leading to salvation. It does so through various states, sometimes joyful and at other times miserable. And though these are beyond our comprehension, still they are all profitable to our eternal life. Those who have a perception of the Lord's presence also have a perception that every single thing that happens to them is conducive to their own welfare, and that no evil influences can reach them. This is what gives them the peace they enjoy. Without such faith or trust in the Lord, no one can ever attain that peace, nor accordingly the bliss which joy brings, since that bliss resides within such peace. Those who trust in the divine, though concerned about the morrow, let alone worried or concerned about the morrow, yet they are unconcerned in that they are not anxious, let alone worried when they give thought to the morrow. They remain even-tempered whether or not they realize desires, and they do not grieve over loss. They are content with their lot. If they become wealthy, they do not become infatuated with wealth. If they are promoted to important positions, they do not consider themselves worthier than others. If they become poor, they are not made miserable either. If lowly in status, they do not feel downcast. They know that for those who trust in the divine, all things are moving towards an everlasting state of happiness, and that no matter what happens at any time to them, it contributes to that state. It should be recognized that divine providence is overall, that is, it is present within the smallest details of all, and that people in the stream of providence are being carried along constantly towards happier things, whatever appearance the means may present. Divine providence focuses on eternal matters and focuses on temporal matters only as they coincide with eternal ones. Amen. Here end our lessons, and blessed are they who hear the word of God and keep it. Amen.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see,
humble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea. I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now, stand by me, stand by me. Darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now, stand by me, stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, just stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now, stand by me, stand by me.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. It's interesting that preaching on how we are led perfectly by the Lord and everything that happens to our betterment. And copier didn't work this morning. The live streaming wasn't working. The microphone's not working. I messed up the song at the end. It's just a little reminder that we need to trust that it'll be okay. And trust that it'll be fine. Because you look around you and life can be pretty chaotic at times. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, as we might label them. And how do we handle that? How do we hold that? Do we take that as a sign that the Lord has left us behind, or that the Lord is there, but he's leading us through those difficulties? You look at the world around you as well, there's a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of unrest, and you can sometimes wonder, is the Lord present in that? Or why doesn't the Lord show up? Or why doesn't he come in and intercede in some way so that this stops happening? Or you look at your own life, and you can say, well, my behaviors are out of control. I try to follow these things, but I keep messing up. Is the Lord really there? He said he would be there. Why can't I stop? Why can't things be different than this? So what's going on? So from our perspective, it can look pretty messy, right? I think the world looks rather messed up at times as we look at it. And thankfully, the Lord has given us a window into how he leads us and how he's governing us and why things might happen that we might consider to be disasters or things that we might consider to be horrible or bad. But is the Lord present, and is he leading us through those things? There's two different passages I want to quote here just a moment that talk about how, from our perspective, how the Lord is governing us. The first example is that he says it looks like to us a bunch of scattered pebbles on the ground. So we look at it and we just see, I don't see any order in that. It just looks like chaos. It looks like, how is that the Lord's leadership? And the other example is, it looks like scattered heaps. So you're going by a building site and all you see is a bunch of boards and stuff lying around. And to us, it looks like a bunch of scattered heaps, as the passage says. So the first one is spiritual experiences. It says, the moments of our life appear like scattered pebbles. But the Lord then sees whether we fill up that space between them. And he sees what is lacking and where it's lacking, and then continually what's next in order. After 100 years or 1,000 years and so forth. How many of you have a 1,000-year plan for your life or a 100-year plan for your life, right? The Lord's looking at the big picture. He's seeing the big picture, and we're often very focused on right here, this very moment, like next week or tomorrow. I have to make this big decision. This other passage, Divine Providence 2:3, says, "From these things it's clear that the divine providence of the Lord is universal, because it is in the most individual things, and that this is the infinite and eternal creation which the Lord provided for himself by means of the creation of the universe." We do not see anything of this universal providence. So the Lord's saying, you're not going to see the big picture the way he's seeing it. And if we did, it could not appear to us as otherwise than passers-by see the scattered heaps and collection of materials from which a house is to be built, while the Lord sees it as a magnificent palace with its work of construction and enlargement constantly going on. A wonderful picture. For us, we look at the world and we look at our life and we look at situations and go, what a mess. Nothing good could possibly come from this. What the Lord sees is a beautiful palace under construction. He looks at our lives and he sees that we are a beautiful angel under construction. And there'll be times when it doesn't feel like that, right? There'll be times like it looks like a bunch of scattered pebbles. Is the Lord really in charge? Or it looks like a bunch of scattered pieces of wood all over the ground. How is this going to become a beautiful palace? So to me, that's encouraging. The Lord sees something very different from what we see. But can we believe that what he sees is true, that it's actual? I've come across this at another way, which is there's a story of the children of Israel, which was shared this morning, where if you know the story, they were slaves in Egypt, and they were led out of slavery by Moses through the wilderness. They got to the promised land in under a year, and they were afraid to go in because they saw giants there and they saw walled cities. So they listened to the 10 spies that said, no, we shouldn't go in, instead of Caleb and Joshua. So they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, where they ate manna every day, the same thing every day for 40 years, and they were attacked by enemies from time to time, and they were hungry and thirsty and so forth. You know the story. And after 40 years, all those people who didn't believe they could go in the land had died off. So now they were ready to go in. And this is what the Lord says to them. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing. Okay? You haven't lacked a thing. What's your reaction to that, if that was you? Maybe you look at your own life and say, I'm being led right where I need to be, and I haven't lacked a thing. I have exactly everything I've needed. You might argue with me and say, I don't think so. That's not at all what my life feels like. It says, you've lacked nothing. But here's the thing. They made it to the promised land, didn't they? They made it there, and the Lord gave them the promised land just as he said he would. Their enemies were scattered. Those who occupied the lands were quickly overrun by the children of Israel, and they occupied the land and had peace. So is that story a success story? I say, yes, it's a success story, because the big picture, that's exactly what the Lord said would happen. So one of the teachings that we have from the Lord on divine providence is that he looks out for our eternal welfare. You might think of it as your forever life. He's looking at where I'm going to be forever, my eternal perspective. And from that perspective, we could say that, yeah, I guess maybe the Lord is leading me okay. But if we're not looking from that perspective, we could say the Lord's leadership is a failure. The Lord's leadership of the children of Israel was a success because he did what he said they would, and something happened to them on the way that changed them. So the children of Israel's story from being slaves in Egypt to being in the promised land is a picture of our own spiritual life. How the Lord leads us out of addiction or bad habits where we're stuck like slaves in Egypt, and he leads us out of that state into a state of freedom, a state of joy, a land flowing with milk and honey. But you can't get on a plane and fly out of Cairo and land in Jerusalem, and that's the journey. That's not the journey that the Lord is talking about. It's a long process, just like our life in this world is a long process. So here's another passage that talks about how the Lord is with us every moment. And if he wasn't, yes, our lives would become a disaster, but he is with us every moment. And if he wasn't, listen to what the passage says. The work of the divine providence is unceasing in its efforts to save us. This may be illustrated by the following comparison. If a javelin thrower or a marksman were to aim at a target, and a straight line were drawn from the target 1,000 feet beyond it, and if he should err in his aim by only a nail's breadth, his weapon or bullet, at a distance of 1,000 feet, would diverge very far from the line drawn beyond the mark. So would it be if the Lord did not every moment, even every least fraction of a moment, regard eternity in foreseeing and providing everyone's place after death. This, however, is done by the Lord because all the future is present to him, and all the present is to him eternal. It may be seen above that the divine providence is, in everything it does, has regard to the infinite and the eternal. Again, you notice it talks about the Lord's looking at the eternal picture. He's looking at the big picture. We, again, are often looking at a very small picture. So we get very stressed out because it's not going well. My life is not going well. Look at it. Okay, do we see what the Lord sees? We are taught that we're not permitted to see the divine providence in the face, meaning we're not allowed to see what's going to happen before it happens. But we're only allowed to see it from behind, meaning we're allowed to see after things have happened that, oh, I see that the Lord was leading me there. But when we're in it, we often think the Lord's not leading us. My life isn't going well. And we're not permitted to know the future. Because if we did know the future, what would we do? We would try to change it, right? We would try to mess it up. We would say, well, I don't like the way I see that's going, so I'm going to change this, even though going through that might lead you to a deeper sense of happiness. But we don't like that. We don't like discomfort. We don't like pain. We don't like to not know. But the Lord will not let us know the future because we will change it. We would prevent all hardships. Think about it, if you were one of the children of Israel who was a slave in Egypt, and Moses said, I'm going to free you from slavery with the Lord's help, and then we're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and you're going to eat the same thing every day. And you're going to be thirsty and starving. And by the end of it, all of you that are here who are 20 and older are going to die. But your children will make it in. How many of them would have said, okay, that sounds good. Let's do that? I think they would have said, no, we'll just stay here. Slavery isn't so bad after all. At least we can eat real food or something. So we have a bigger picture of you in mind. Life is more clear. Life is more simple. In the book of Deuteronomy, the Lord says, in retrospect, every commandment which I command you today, you must be careful to observe, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land of which the Lord swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that the Lord your God led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you and to test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. The perspective that happens, that changes in us when we go through hardship is we start to realize that my life's not all about bread, or it's not all about natural things. It's about spirituality. It's about higher things. And sometimes we have to go through hard times for that to be something we're aware of. The children of Israel would not have been ready for the promised land because they were afraid. They didn't trust in the Lord. But by the time they came back 40 years later, they were ready. They were a strong nation that trusted in God. So a hardship that we may be experiencing now may feel enormous to us, and it is big to us. But it can result in happiness later. Think about a child who struggles with math, or with fairness when they're playing with other children, or maybe a young person feeling awkward on a first date. They can feel like these are the biggest issues any human being has ever felt and dealt with in their whole lives, right? They only focus on the hardship. They only focus on the possibility of failure. But as adults who have been through those things, we can look at it and go, yeah, I know that it's stressful and it can be hard, but you'll get through it. You'll get through it. I promise you'll get through it. We can be sympathetic to them or empathetic to them, but we can see beyond the problem to the good that can result if they'll get through it. And that's, to me, a glimpse of how the Lord sees things. It's all about our perspective of the Lord working in our lives. And I admit it's easy to get discouraged when things are going badly. Right? Things aren't going well. We figure, well, I'm discouraged. It's not working out. The Lord is at work in our lives, even in the pain and the suffering and the hardship, because he's working for our eternal happiness. I love that story of the disciples being asked by the Lord to go across the sea, and as they go, their storm arises. But it says that the Lord went up on a mountain by himself to pray. So he's in the inward parts of our lives praying for us, trying to help us to get through that difficult time. And he does actually go to them. So here's a little story to share with you. It says, the only survivor of a shipwreck washed up on a small uninhabited island. He prayed feverishly for God to rescue him, and every day he scanned the horizon for help, but none seemed forthcoming. Exhausted, he eventually managed to build a little hut out of driftwood to protect him from the elements and to store his few possessions. But then one day, after scavenging for food, he arrived home to find his little hut in flames, the smoke rolling up into the sky. The worst had happened. Everything was lost. He was stung with grief and anger. God, how could you do this to me? He cried. Early the next day, however, he was awakened by the sound of a ship that was approaching the island. It had come to rescue him. How did you know I was here? Asked the weary man of his rescuers. We saw your smoke signal, they replied. So maybe the next time our little hut is burning to the ground, it might be just what is needed for positive change in our life. So it's hard to know how you're being led, but I think it's important to trust that we are being led. When I was at Penn State University studying business, I was interviewing on campus, and I got an interview with Yellow Freight System, a trucking company. And so I was set to go on this interview. And my brother, who was in sales at the time, had won a trip to Jamaica, and he invited me to go with him. So I said, sure. The only problem was that this trip to Jamaica conflicted with the interview with Yellow Freight. But, of course I said, I'm going to Jamaica. Forget about Yellow Freight. So as time went on, it turns out, I didn't tell them I was canceling the interview yet, but it turns out there was a hurricane, and it devastated the island of Jamaica, sadly. So the trip was off. So I went on this interview. I got the job. I was told, you're going to be working in Baltimore. So I thought, all right, Baltimore is nice, I guess. I've never been there, really, but I'll go there. A week later, it's not nice, all right, good. A week later, I got another letter from the company saying, no, you're going to be working in South Philadelphia. So, all right, changed my mind. Living in Philadelphia, or that's where my family was, so I could stay at home, I could commute and so forth. And the way my schedule worked out, I had time in the morning to take courses at the Bernathen College, which is a new church college. And I was just thinking, well, I feel like a business degree was kind of like common sense, so I'm going to take some English and history courses to flesh out my education. So I went to register for these courses, and the only courses that fit my life were study of the divine providence and comparative religions. So I thought, what harm can that do? So I started to take these courses, and I found myself very interested in those things, and I thought, wow, I'm really engaged in this. I really love these courses. What's the next step? The only next step, it seemed, was, well, I could teach religion, but I still have to become a minister. So I guess I'll try and sign up to be a minister. So I did. And I figure, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but studying theology for 4 years can't be all that bad. If it doesn't work out, what's the worst thing that could happen? So there's a lot more to that story. But my point of the story is you don't know how you're being led or how your life is going to turn. I had no thought in my mind whatsoever before those courses that I would become a minister or study theology. So I guess life takes a turn and things are different. So beware of that. You just never know where you're being led. So one passage I want to share with you from Spiritual Experiences says that we can't be led better than we are. Think about that for a moment. We can't possibly be being led better than we are by the Lord. Now you might say, well, that's not true because bad things are happening to me and the people that I love. The passage goes on and says, spirits suppose that these are people who have lived on this earth, had died, and are now in the spiritual world, and they're supposing this. It says, spirits suppose that they could have been led differently and so become better than they are. thus be kept from actual evils and many things. So they're thinking, if the Lord had done a better job, I would have been a better person, pretty much is what they're saying. The evil throw the blame on the Lord, but they were told that it is their fault. I perceived in spiritual idea that they can never be led better than they are. So think about that. It may be a challenge to think about that we are being led as perfectly as we can be by the Lord with what's happening in our life, with what we're doing, and the choices that we're making. So I just want to give you 7 suggestions to help incorporate this notion, which is, number 1, is to acknowledge that there is a God. If you're in process with that, that's fine. I think we all are in some way trying to figure out if there is a God, who God is, and so forth, and what does that mean. But acknowledge there's a God. Second thing is to acknowledge that God knows what he's doing. Got it figured out. We may not see it yet, but there's God and he knows what he's doing. The third thing is to believe that he knows best what will make you happy. And I know we fight that. It is like, I hear what you're saying, Lord, there, but I want to do this. So I'm going to challenge you on that, and I'm going to try this and find out. How many of us have tried things thinking that was the right thing to do and found out later that was really not okay, and that was me disregarding totally what the Lord said? So believe he knows best what will make you happy. And fourth is believe that he's told us how to be happy. It's written down somewhere. That's been revealed somewhere. The answers are somewhere. The fifth thing is seek this knowledge in his word and through prayer. So not just knowing that that information is there, but finding out what it is. What is that information? And the sixth thing is start following the path that he's laid out. I know this is tricky for us because we are very easily duped by thinking that we have it figured out, and that's it. That I don't actually have to live it. I actually have to, if it's in my head, then I'm doing it. But that's not true. Knowing it and living it are very different things. So start walking the path he's laid down. And once we start doing that, stop wondering what would have happened on path B. I was thinking about my yellow freight store. I was thinking, well, I wonder what would have happened if I did go to Jamaica. What would life have been like if that had happened? I have no idea, and I don't need to know. But it would have been very different, I'm pretty sure. The little things in our life you don't know, don't worry about it. If you trust that if you're following the Lord, trust that you're on the right path. So I'm going to end with this. The author is unknown on this, but I think the words are useful. It says, I asked for strength, and God gave me difficulties to make me strong. I asked for wisdom, and God gave me problems to solve. I asked for prosperity, and God gave me brawn and brain to work. I asked for courage, and God gave me dangers to overcome. I asked for patience. God placed me in situations where I was forced to wait. I asked for love, and God gave me troubled people to help. I asked for favors, and God gave me opportunities. I received nothing I wanted. I received everything I needed. My prayer has been answered. Amen. Bow your heads with me for a moment. Lord, in our struggles to understand your providence and understand life and all of its ups and downs, help us to take the steps forward that we need to take to trust in you, to go to you in your word, to learn of your ways, and to practice them. And when we stumble, ask for help. Help us to have the courage to seek the support of other people in this path. We are not here alone because we need one another. Thank you, Lord, for the beautiful teachings of providence. Help us to believe in them and live by them. Amen. We have a moment where you can offer prayers if you have prayer requests for people you're thinking about or situations you're concerned about. Yes. Yes, prayers for those in the Gulf. Thank you. Yes. So prayers of gratitude for Bruce and Valerie, your parents' 50 years. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Prayers for your dad and his recovery. Thank you, Denise. Yep. Yes. A friend who's diagnosed with breast cancer. Prayers for them. Thank you. Yep. Juliet. Thank you. So prayers for your dad and who's dealing with dementia and your family who's there and supporting. Thank you. Okay. Dave Noble. Thank you, Kai. Yep. Stephanie. Prayers for Ben and for Noah and those transitions. And I did want to mention all those starting schools all over the place. There's college, high school, elementary school, and so forth. And prayers for those to go well and to learn and be supported, and for us not to be too sad missing them all. Greg. Happy birthday to your mom, Gail. 80th birthday. Thank you. Doug. Nice. For a peaceful eclipse. Thank you. Deborah. Yes. Prayers for Gareth texted me this morning to say, make sure to say thank you. Let's see if that's something I can read here. But yes, prayers for Anna as she heals from the heart surgery. He said, Anna was doing well enough that she's been discharged and is at home today. Please let all know there that the prayers have helped, and she's very sore and in discomfort, but is resting at home and is getting a little bit better every day. I can't thank you and everyone enough for your kind words. It was a very trying time. So thank you, everybody, for your prayers and support for them. I see another. Yeah. Yes. Gratitude for the wonderful young people. Thank you. You have one of them at school too. So thank you. Chuck Eper also had some knee replacement surgery, so thinking of him and his healing. And Aaron Cahoon had some surgery as well, so prayers for them. And I also understand that today is Mary's birthday. She's no longer 102, she's 103. So I'm sorry she's not He's not here today to celebrate, but next time you see her, wish her a happy birthday. But what a wonderful gift for us to have her be part of a congregation and to interact with her. So it's not often you get to see someone who's 103 and interact with them and have, she's just so positive and wonderful to be around. So happy birthday to her. Anybody else? And it is birthday Sunday, but we'll get to that later. So, anything else? All right, let's have a minute of silence.
Let's sing one more song found on page 152, Seek Only Thy Perfect Way.
I long to be able to enter
Well, does anyone have any comments or questions or thoughts to? You can pass those around. Why not? I know I don't have to eat them. Don't have anything they want to ask or share or question or whatever? Hi.
The question I have for you is sort of an internal conversation that I have with. I've always felt that God's led me, but it wasn't until I accepted His leading that things changed. Does that make sense? And can you speak to that sort of that aspect of humanness, which is once you accept it and you say, okay, now I've always felt it since I was a kid that God, Lord, has led me. But again, can you talk about how that's an important aspect, or at least I think it's an important aspect to actually say, okay, I'm going to make that decision, and how that changes everything.
That's an interesting question. Maybe it's, well, I guess if you think of it as partnership and teamwork instead of, the Lord, behold, I stand at the door and knock. I sort of picture what you say before that acknowledgement as Lord's knocking, but He's standing outside. He's still trying to lead you, but it's harder to have a relationship when someone's on the other side of the door. So if you let Him in, the relationship can change and you can interact in a much more meaningful way. And I think partly it's your faith is strengthened because you start to see that you are being led rather than. So to me, that's something I've noticed is once I believe I'm being led, I start to see that I'm being led and go, oh, that's cool. And you believe it more and more, and I think it gets strengthened. So maybe that's a simple way to see it. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. I think it's a good question. Stephanie?
Oh, yeah.
There's people online depending upon you. They want to hear you. I did.
I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I think that's for me too, is in the good times, and I just try to hold on to what, looking back and seeing where it's led, and I definitely pull on that. And, I often share with good friends so they can remind me.
Thank you. Bradley.
So I've been thinking about this week, actually, and it's the idea that we hand responsibility over to God, and we don't take care of it ourselves because we know God's in control. And I think I understand that when things are going badly and you need some kind of focus to get you through that. But can it not create sort of it kind of cuts off your motivation to kind of, you go, well, everything's okay and everything's going okay and God will take care of it. I've struggled with that a little bit.
To be clear, we're not, or at least I'm not trying to say that we don't take initiative and don't act as if it all depends upon us, because it does. There's a, a Russian proverb that says, pray but row for shore. So we're supposed to pray and trust in the Lord, but he's telling you, you also need to row to shore. So the other way that it's said is, pray as if everything depends upon God, but act as if everything depends upon you. So I think that's really, there's a balance there that we, it's like waking up in the morning and praying to the Lord and say, Lord, lead me, guide me, help me with things, and then you have to go out and do it. And so it's not, I hear what you're saying. There's a passage in the Divine Providence that talks about people that believe that and they just hang their hands down and wait to be motivated and have the influx flow into them. And the Lord's saying that's not how it works. I've given you freedom. I've given you the feeling that life is your own. Now you have to live as if it's your own, but you have to know and believe and make choices knowing that there is a God who's leading you and guiding you. And I think sometimes we feel like, well, that means I'm not free. Well, you actually are free. But it's a beautiful partnership between the Lord and us. I don't feel like I'm expressing it that clearly, but yes, just to be clear, no, don't hang your hands down and wait for influx. Act as if it's up to you, but make sure you checked in with the Lord doing your own spiritual work so that my experience is when I'm selfish and a jerk and those sorts of things, it feels like the world is hard. And it's because I've sort of removed myself from the stream of providence. But when I start to live right, it feels like things open up and it starts to flow differently. And it doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, because they will, but I know who my source, where my strength comes from, and I can work through it. So it's that whole thing. And I'm sure others have things to say about that, so Juliet does.
Yeah. No, I like what you said. You said row for shore. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, row for shore. You've got to do the work. My question, like Brad, I think I've been thinking about lots of things this week, and I still, in my mind, cannot get in. I've asked you this, I don't know how many times, but I still, maybe I don't understand it, or I can't believe it. You say the Lord doesn't cause things to happen, but he allows them to happen for our eternal good. So are we saying that the things that he does allow to happen, I really need to learn from? So although he doesn't cause it, like if I find myself in really challenging situations, the Lord is saying, Juliet, there's things you can really learn from these situations, so I'm going to allow this to happen so you can learn the lessons that you need to learn here.
How much time do you have? It's a big question, and I think there's the Lord's divine providence, his will, which is everything that is good that he wants for us. And I'll put it up here because it's good. And then there's permission, which are the things you're describing, which are things that are bad that happen, but good can come from it. So it would be much better to be dealing with this kind of thing. But sometimes, because of human freedom, bad things happen. Like if I pull out a gun and shoot somebody, I've made a human choice, and it's impacted myself and that other person. So I'm allowed to do that. Hopefully I'm going to be guided by it to not do that, but I can do that. So if that did happen, the Lord would permit it, because he can't prevent it in my freedom, but he can help good to come out of it. So it would be much better if I didn't do that, and if I just loved people and did all those good things and let love flow into me and so forth. So, and there's a whole bunch in between. So there's his will, his, what do you call it, good pleasure, and, I'm forgetting all the words, but there's a bunch of different words in between describing sort of different layers of really great, not so great, okay, and so forth. But again, the Lord is allowing things to happen if he can't prevent them. He would love to prevent bad things from happening if he could, without encroaching upon our freedom and the freedom of other people. So within all that is the answer to your question, that does the Lord want this to happen? No. He's trying to prevent it from happening. But if he can't prevent it from happening because he made us free, then he will make sure that through that we can learn something good might come from it. I know it's a lot to swallow, but it's somewhere in there is, we could talk for a long time more about that. But
Okay, so then one last thing around that
Yeah.
then. So if he wants our eternal happiness, isn't he going to put us in because he loves us, he is going to put us in positions where we are going to learn things.
Yep.
If we're not always doing those, if he loves us enough, he'll say, "Hey, Juliet, you're not being very patient. Let me allow
let me smack you
to be
upside
in
the head so you can.
Yeah, because he cares about my eternal life.
Well, the Lord never does anything evil or hurtful. Hell does those things, and the Lord can permit those things to happen, but he is not saying, "Hey, demon, why don't you go kick her butt so she can learn a lesson?" That's not the way that he operates. He's only trying to cause good to happen, and he's trying to control the bad from happening. But if he can see,
Yeah.
think about it from, a child touching a hot stove. You as a parent are going to try to prevent them from touching the hot stove and teach them just by words that can burn you. But sometimes you have to allow them to, because they're going to do it. But hopefully you can allow them to do it in a way that doesn't destroy their hand, but they can get a sense that this is hot, and okay, I learned my lesson. So, yes, all of that is, I know it's hard to figure it out, and again, we won't know until everything is in retrospect to go, oh, okay, that's what I learned. When you're in it, whatever the difficulty is, it's like, I don't think this is a good idea. Can't you think of a different path for me? I would like plan B. Thank you very much. Let's remove this one. So, great questions, great topic, and we could preach on divine providence forever. That would be fun. So maybe I will. But not right now. So, birthday Sunday. Thank you for your thoughts. Why don't you come on in, birthday people? Again, we mentioned Mary, who is 103. Can't beat that, I don't think, anybody, so don't try. Anyone else have birthdays in the month of August besides Kellen Roth, my son? He's 19 soon. Yes. Deborah does. Yes, you do. Happy birthday. Anybody else? Yes. Juliet. Happy birthday, Juliet. Maggie, you have a birthday? Doug? You? Rachel's birthday is Tuesday. I learned. Malik. Callan's birthday. Yes, there he is. Nigel. Your mom's birthday. Happy birthday to her. 80. That's a good number. Yes. You did. Happy 40th, Paulina. Happy birthday. Anniversary. Oh, Greg. Almost 50, the dark side of 40. Yes. Anybody else or anniversaries? 26 years of marriage. Congratulations. All right. Sorry? 14 years. Happy anniversary. Yes. Jessica. Wow. Awesome. Gary and Judy, 57, and you guys, 19. Congratulations. Gail. How many years has that been now? 12. Happy anniversary. Happy adoption. Yes. Yes. I did. But it's noteworthy. It is noteworthy to say again, because I don't think anyone can top that. So I'm sorry she's not here to sing to, but we'll get her next time maybe. Anybody else? We cover everybody? All right. Well, sing happy birthday, dear friends. Happy